All right, so this one is going to be a little interesting. In the audiobook version, we're going to have a sound effect in some places. Because in the beginning, you'll see. So instead, I'm just going to kind of like... But keep with me. Oh, here we go. 37. Why won't the banshee scream work, little hero? 21. 56. A gargantuan man hung in mid-conflagration, his body a spectre of flames which lit the vaulted dome above the prisoners' heads. Wolf huddled in a corner, knees to shoulders, both arms outstretched via organic chains which dug into his flesh like the pincers of the banshee and her larval brood. Adelia Fridley stirred onto her palms, hair slick on her cheeks and down the back of her neck. Fingers nudged a sore spot on her shoulder, sweat and the creature's verdant blood visible in the blue light. Where? Arms wrenched her from the puddle, yanked back until Adelia landed with a huff against a bundle of seaweed and palm fronds. It quivered. A single eye stalk rose up, yellowed and brown on the edges. Tokaru. Singh covered her mouth with a hand soaked in gore, stained her skin until Adelia's lips tasted copper and bile-risen bitterness. She groaned in alarm until Singh shook her, face near hers as he whispered again. Questions of where they'd got to faded as Adelia looked up the dome vault above. Drip drops of water scurried down metal girders to pools in the lowest spots on the bedrock, smoothed by scuffled feet in their dozens. She held a gasp in the pit of her stomach as Adelia saw the only light within the space was the conflagatory pyre of Percival. Limbs spread to their limits and corded with carapace limbs from the banshee's larval young. Dim blue haze betrayed their proximity to the ocean's break and cast the undersea dome into a blue and orange bruise of a place. Out. Adelia could put Percival out. Unlike the others, she felt no bonds around her wrists or ankles, nor was she a pile of loose plucked foliage like Tokaru. She spread her fingers in the pile, feeling for a leaf large enough to use as a bowl. Singh dove for her, rolled them both into Tokaru's foliage. Lips moved, but Adelia didn't catch his whispers. She glanced sideways at his face, dark hair stuck along his forehead and neck, turban stained with mud. Another mutter from the man until his lips stilled at her confusion. Oh my God. This time, Singh's words were slower spoken. As if he made a sound, Adelia remained ignorant to its vibrations. Muffled by her own breath, no sound entered the cochlea of her ears or set hammer to anvil. He cupped her chin with shaken fingers, spoke, and watched blue eyes flicker from his eyes to his lips. You're deaf. The man shoved her into Tokaru's foliage, which opened up enough to pocket her as Singh held his hands to his temples. Teeth grit, the veins on the sides of his neck bulged, and Adelia searched wide-eyed for the stimulus behind this body crash of pain. Opposite Percival's flame-licked body, the banshee shuffled to 4 of its limbs. Elongated mouth clacked in a long ball. Green blood flowed between chitinous plates around the arthropoidal torso. Eyes, human eyes, opened in the belly of the monster. Painful brown eyes, lost so long to their humanity, all Adelia saw in the silence was the wail of a woman encapsulated in death knells, which never came. Larvae rolled round the banshee, their faceless bodies undulated between the cords which bound them down to the undersea vault. From the ceiling, a long rope descended and swiveled to reveal the black and white screen of a television, turned to an unclear channel. Welcome, my unfortunate pretty ones. I am Aida of the Pacific Stem, and you are trespassed property of the Syndicate of Human Expanse. Hair raked back, Aida pursed violet-painted lips and fixed the gray turtleneck under her chin. The image froze, her face contorted in an odd dance before it caught up to the lip babble. Banshee, we knew your precious conglomerate was dealing in genetic engineering, and now the proof stands. Or, well, burns before us. Her head turned in a sick laugh until her eyebrows quirked and Aida scowled. That was a joke. Jokes are funny. You ought to laugh at good jokes. Her shoulder dipped and Adelia imagined she pushed some off-screen button as the others cringed and roiled. Adelia sunk into Takaru's foliage and pretended to shake at the sonic punishment. Sonics. Were sonics the best humanity mustered away from the modern machine's potential controls? In a world of noise, of free communications thanks to Lieben's dissemination of global connectivity, why were some frequencies secret from the mother machine? My dear, my child, you injured my beloved Banshee. The televised apparition glared at Adelia. A minuscule dot above the television shone in Percival's flame. A camera lens? How did you do it, Angel? You are the first to be immune to my Banshee's call. Adelia shook her head and sunk deeper into Takaru's web until she felt the solidity of Takaru's permanent flesh. The arm which held her was as spindle-thin as a starved toddler and gave less comfort. Tell Auntie Aida and I will allow you one request. That is how little girls prove their worth, isn't it? By being silently obedient until given permission to speak. She grinned a yellow and gray smile, teeth jagged. Put Percival out! Douse the flames on Percival! Adelia blurted out, formed the words as precisely as she could in an attempt to avoid the deaf tone of her childhood voice. Not until Auntie Aida gets her answers. How are you not writhing in pain from Auntie's pet? Adelia's eyes flickered around. Hunched on his elbows and knees, Singh shook his head, then dry heaved as the banshee clucked and chittered. The monster crashed forward, and momentarily Adelia's fellows stopped writhing. Aida's frigid eyes snapped to the creature. Disobedient girls get no reward. Her fingers snapped in the screen, and the larvae shook, craned their mouthless bodies in an arc around the banshee. It rose, one broken limb and its remaining forelimbs slashed at the air. Singh was down again, gripped his head, and Adelia fumbled to hit the ground, grab her own temples in pantomime. Let out a scream for good measure. The larvae lunged, not at Takaru, Wolf, and Percival, but at the banshee. Macabre rips of flesh opened in their headless necks. Green blood oozed from the wounds, which revealed vestigial teeth as round and jagged as leeches. They cut into the banshee, ripped and tore and thrashed as the larvae consumed their parent flesh. Adelia screamed, horrified and clear. She scrambled back into Singh and Takaru, shoved them closer to Wolf. The larvae scarfed their hive mother, down to the umbilicals which tied them to her carapace. Aida craned her neck back in a laugh. Now, my puppet! Why won't the banshee scream work on you? Tell me now, and get small comforts for yourself before the end. Look! Look! Aida's yellowed teeth shone behind her painted lips as the larvae left only the exoskeletal chitin of their matriarch in their frenzy. The lot of them roiled on the ground, writhed as a spew of thick white ooze regurgitated out of their ripped holes of mouths. The expectorant slid along their bodies, stuck to the floor until the mass of them were embalmed in their own fluids. Pulses struck against the white mass of the communal cocoon. Far-off war drums. You will bear witness to my banshee's offspring, and I guarantee once they absorb and integrate their progenitor's DNA, they will be hungry again hungry for a girl child and her immunity to their song, hungry for the bravery and skill of that turban-headed idiot writhing beside you, or maybe your floral friend. Yes, that organism is fascinating. Could you imagine it? Improving upon my original design with plant DNA? Maybe then my banshees could regrow limbs lost or slink through hatchways. With each successive generation, my beloved banshees grow powerful, and you will eventually be part of their hive. Those lingering buffoons on the surface will succumb one by one, and your conglomerate's gains in genetic engineering will become ours, as the world will become ours. Ensign Adelia Fridley. The television raced up to a black oblong shape on the roof of the dome, leaving the prisoners to their silence with no sign of its presence but the slim beacon of the camera lens's reflection. Adelia panted and shook, reached to drag one of the exoskeletal limbs of the banshee away from the roiling cocoon. She turned to find Commander Singh on his knees, motioning the limb over. Allard is alive. So are Adarastos, Cillian, Beston. If she mentioned them, they must be well enough to mount a rescue. He panted, but kept his lips slow and deliberate for Adelia to read, struggled from his sprawl. Her heart struck at her ribcage. Max was alive. Much as I'd love to wait for Max to find his inner aggro and know how to breathe through gills, we can't. Once those things wake up, who will they go for next? Wolf? Percival? Takaru can barely move. We have to defend ourselves. As she spoke, Adelia yanked loose the back plate of the banshee's carcass in 3 sickened pieces. She turned it into a scoop and chucked one of the pieces to Singh. He filled hers with the unclean puddle water and threw it onto Percival. Singh followed suit, and the two worked in silence to put out the last of the flames. Percival hung limp in his bonds. Timid hiccups of breath, their only indication the charred flesh surrounded a living being. Wolf thrashed at his moorings, teeth snarled in reptilian survivalism. Empty eyes glared up at Adelia in the blue half-light as she searched his wrists for a catch or lock on the chains. What she found were spears of chitin through the hollow of Wolf's wrists. No shackles in the banshee's world, but a biological crucifixion. Oh, Wolf, Adelia patted herself down to see if any of her tools survived. While Singh supported Percival's bulk and fiddled with the chitin through his wrists, Adelia found a length of metal wire in her back zip pocket. She unwound it and wrapped it around the chitin, made loops with her fingers and sawed it back and forth. The wire cut into her own fingers and she let it, until the weight of Wolf's body broke his bonds and he tumbled to the sodden ground. Back against the glass, Adelia curled into a ball. The air chilled her wet uniform, hair plastered down her neck as she shook. Wolf nuzzled up into her, sunk his arm around her shoulders, and hugged her to his side, out of no affection but that which was brought on by mutual survival. His body was warmer than she expected, and she thought little when he pulled her hands one at a time to his lips, licked clean her blood, the gore there. Humans were such tiny creatures, smaller than larvae or Adarastos' boots. They writhed in day and dark, shook through struggle in such fretful, useless ways. But Wolf tasted Adelia's vigor in her blood. He suckled like a cub until her hands were clean, then let the essence fill his empty belly and sunk to unconsciousness with quandaries of how the larvae would taste when they awoke strong enough to thrash them into smaller pieces than they left of their sire.